We sold the company for a lot of money. I had an Aston Martin DB9 in the drive. I had a big boat in Spain and a big house. But I also had a cocaine addiction, alcohol addiction, and my life literally fell apart. I have everything, literally everything, that society tells you you should have in order to lead a fulfilling and rewarding and wonderful life. But I didn't even want to be in life. No matter how low you go, there is a way out. I'm living a life beyond my wildest dreams now because I was forced. My feet were held to the fire by the suffering. So there's the suffering. Stop running from it. Accept that it's there. Fully accept that it's there. That full acceptance gives me this incredible clarity. I can see it for what it is, to be able to experience the pain and the pleasure with absolute equanimity. Because really what's happening is you're experiencing experience. And that's transcendent. We are all already the pure white light of being and of consciousness. But flipping heck, doesn't that seem boring? The mistake is thinking you need to do something to bring it into your life. It's already there. It's the getting rid of the stuff that's blocking your way, getting rid of the clouds. This is the peace that passeth all understanding. And it's always there. Always.
Welcome to this week's Humankinder podcast. What would you do if you woke up one day and you had everything that you had ever dreamed of, and yet you felt miserable inside? That was the experience that really started Tom Griffin on the path of seeking. He shares his incredible story in this podcast, from high-flying entrepreneur to a stint in prison, through awakening through his own true nature, and now living the life of his dreams on the inside out. Tom shares a very simple approach to spirituality, the recognition that we are all already awake. We just have to remove the illusion that we're not. This is a wide-ranging conversation that goes everywhere from exploring the nature of reality to uncovering what does it actually mean to be a human being? What is our essential nature? How do we embrace relationships with other people, emotional upset? What do we do with the pain? And when all hope seems lost, when everything has been taken away from us, what is actually left? In every moment, there is happy. What if I told you that in every moment of your life, no matter what you're doing, there is happy? What would that be like? To be able to find happy in every moment, an innate sense of pure presence in this one eternal moment of being alive. But in longing, we lost our way. At some point in the evolutionary road, we were led astray, lured by the beguiling guide of material pride, who would then rob us of the gifts it gave, only to then give again and make us slaves to its craving. We forgot that happy is not what happens when something or other arrives. It's what being alive actually feels like. Happy is the blue sky that's always there behind the constant clouds of craving. I'd love you to help us understand what it is you're pointing to there.
That's our essential nature, the essential nature of what it is to be. And if you can become still enough, that's what you notice. So we can put any labels on it. The trouble with words like happy or love or consciousness or awake or pure presence is that they're so loaded and they become so full of meaning that they're meaningless. So you just have to put any kind of word on it, and a word that hopefully can evoke a somatic response, because these explorations are nothing that can be thought about or worked out. They're not an intellectual endeavor. It's a somatic experience. It's a feeling. And as soon as you try to take that feeling and capture it with words, you end up kind of caging it. And I like to think of emotions rather like those color wheels that show all the different colors that are available to you. I like to think about emotions as being one emotion, and it's that color wheel. And so, whatever particular flavor or temperature or nuance you happen to be experiencing in any given moment, well, that's just part of this one emotion. As Shakespeare put it, nothing is neither good nor bad, but thinking makes it. And therein comes this idea of the way in which our thinking ends up narrowing us down and holding us into certain preconceived spaces. And therefore, once we label something as one thing, we decide for ourselves, okay, if it's happy, then I want to stay there. And so I'm going to be working hard to resist moving away from this fixed place thing called happy. Or if it's a feeling of sadness or anxiety, we're going to be working hard to try and move away from it. Now, why are we going to be doing those two things? This constant clouds of craving. We're going to be doing those two things because we've labeled something as being either good nor bad. But if you recognize that, as Shakespeare put it, nothing is neither good nor bad, it's only us thinking that makes it. Where do you end up? What's left? What's there? And what's pointed to, and it's certainly what I experience in my meditation and in other points, little glimpses, as it were, throughout the day, there is a kind of emptiness which sounds yuck, doesn't sound like very nice, but it's not that kind of emptiness. It's this space of utterly pure potential that can arise and manifest into whatever it is you want to be, not want to be, that can arise into anything and everything that you experience in any given moment. And so when we talk, in that piece, when I talk about this idea of happy, there's a sense of the peace that passeth all understanding is available to us all of the time. It's what we already are before awareness arises something into form. And so what I wanted to point at was the sense that everything you could ever want is always exactly where you are, and it's always exactly what actually is. It's what is beyond and before the labels that we give things. And it's that labeling that causes us the craving, the anxiety, the aspirations, the lack of contentment. So that's what I'm pointing toward.
Yeah, it's this space of open awareness, if I was going to put language around it, that is pure potential in which everything else is arising. But my experience is that certain things feel either bad or good. And I know misery and pain because it feels to me wrong or bad or something to be avoided. And I know more positive emotions like happiness or celebration because they instinctively or intuitively draw me. I like them being there. And so it seems that on some level we're wired, or we come into the world with this pain, pleasure, avoidance.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels right to me to avoid pain and pursue the pleasure. And it doesn't feel like I'm thinking about making it. And if I just rest in open awareness, it's not long until something comes along that pushes me into this like or dislike situation. And so I'd be interested to hear your reflections on that process of resting as open awareness and then suddenly being pulled out of it in many ways. And it doesn't feel like something I'm doing or a choice I'm making or a thought that I'm having, but more like a deeper push.
I think it certainly is deeper. Anything and everything that we think of and conceive is obviously a construct, and it's a construct that exists within the limitations of 3 dimensions, within the limitations of time, and most importantly, within the limitations of our mind. and our ability to conceive of it. So when we're labeling something good or bad and seeking out the good stuff and avoiding the bad, we're doing all of that within the paradigm, if you like, of being a conscious human being in a three-dimensional time-bound in environment. And there's some really interesting work done by, I can't remember his name now, but basically looking at how it was our senses evolved and our perception of the world evolved, and that we didn't evolve to perceive reality. We evolved from from the perspective of health benefits. Of it was useful to us to be able to perceive the light across a certain spectrum, and not useful for us outside of that spectrum. Similarly, all of the other senses. So all of these things, our senses and the way we perceive the world, and therefore the way in which we've then subsequently cognized the world and the constructions we've made up about how the world works and how we work in it, are there to better enable our survival and our health, not to perceive fundamental reality. And this is what I mean about understanding where we are in the evolution of our consciousness as a species. We are at a certain point. I often refer to it as being infants of evolution. And the analogy I draw is, if you imagine one of the major distinguishing evolutionary characteristics of our primate cousins, if you like, was the development of dexterous fingers and opposable thumbs. That was transformative, enabled us to tools and weapons, ultimately to express ourselves in cave drawings, those sort of things. It was evolutionarily revolutionary. Now, my view is, and look today, what can we do today with these opposable thumbs and dexterous fingers? In the hands of a surgeon, we can save lives. In the hands of an artist, paint. We can write. We can incredible things. Play the Stradivarius violin. Incredible things we can now do with the opposable thumbs and dexterous fingers. Let's think about consciousness. As far as consciousness is concerned, we are now where our primate ancestors were when they first developed opposable thumbs and dexterous fingers. Whilst it feels, because by definition we are at the cutting edge of human evolution, so is a 1-year-old baby at the cutting edge of its own growth and its development, but it's only 1 year old. We can look at that baby and go, oh, man, there is so much more to come. But for that baby, this is it. This is the world. This is how it is. This is how it all works. And so that's where we are. We are at that point where it's extraordinarily difficult to be able to elevate ourselves up out of this form and witness this form from the space of the formless. Eckhart Tolle has a lovely way of describing it. He talks about the vertical and the horizontal dimension. The vertical dimension being timelessness, being consciousness, being pure aware being. The horizontal dimension is us living our time-bound lives. And this kind of flips and flops and floats about the place as we experience the world and things happen. We crave this, we don't crave that. We want to feel good things, so we do things to pursue good things, or we think will pursue us good things. We don't want to feel bad, so we do things to help avoid those bad things and all the rest of it, because we've given them meanings. We've made them mean something, so we created this kind of oscillation in this horizontal experience of worldly life and living. But at the intersection of the horizontal and the vertical and the horizontal planes, that's where our moment-to-moment life, moment-to-moment experience of life happens. That's the now. That's at I think, what was it? Somebody, I can't remember his name, called it the intersection of time and the timeless, or intersection of time and timelessness. And it's by being able to anchor ourselves to connect with that vertical dimension of pure consciousness that then starts to hold and steady this experience of life and living. We do live as form in three-dimensional time-bound in environment. That's how we live and that's how we express ourselves. That does not mean that it is the be-all and end-all of everything. What becomes possible, and for me, this is what awakening opens up for us, what becomes possible is the ability to step beyond that parochial experience of being a living being and experience being from that kind of meta perspective, if you like. A simple analogy would be that you could be watching a movie and you're really invested in the movie and you're really locked in there and you're really empathizing with the lead character and you're moving with him and, oh, no, don't go around the corner, don't go. No. So you're really there and you're feeling it and everything's happening inside your body. The emotions are going, you're crying, you're laughing, all that kind of stuff. So you're fully wrapped up in that dimensionality of the movie playing. What you can do at any moment is remind yourself that you're watching a movie. And it could be someone coming into the room, could be anything, or you just remind yourself you're watching a movie. And you go backwards. In Zen Buddhism, they talk about the backward step. You go backwards and you go, oh yeah, I'm here, the movie's there. That lead character is not me. I was just really hooked up and I was really into it because it's a great movie. But I can take this meta position, this relative to the movie screen, I am formlessness, because the movie and the movie screen and the characters in it, they're form. And that, for me, as close as I can get to it so far, is that kind of meta position. And from there, from that place, all of the resources we require to achieve whatever it is we want for ourselves in the form life become immediately obvious to us. And those things like anxiety or stress or worry or panic or joy or bliss or love, all of those things become immediately available to you, and they're depowered. The experience I have sometimes in meditation is I literally find myself laughing out loud. I suddenly start laughing, and then suddenly crying and sobbing, and then laughing again. And that's what led me to this idea of one emotion. Is that when you step back, it's like, really? It's if someone would say to you, Cian, I think you're ugly because you've got two heads and horns sticking out. Okay, you'd say, fine, okay. It wouldn't bother you in the slightest because it's ridiculous. And that's that sense of when you can step back and you just right size everything and it's like, really? Now, okay, yeah.
Beautifully put. And so you're almost describing that the next stage in our evolutionary jump is to recognize that we are that all-encompassing awareness, as opposed to just that small sense of myself that is Tom Griffin or is Cian McEnroe. And in the work being done to recognize that, you can then dependably remind yourself. And it seems like once you achieve that distance, it's a process of continuously reminding yourself. And my curiosity now leads me to ask, how did you come to create that distance in the first place?
It's been a slow progression. There have been a few profound experiences, both in meditation and not in meditation, that have enabled me to experience that sense of empty openness, otherness, to be able to, as if either you could say to allow Tom Griffin to evaporate and recognize that Tom Griffin is simply an arising in awareness. And if there is no awareness of Tom Griffin, then Tom Griffin evaporates, and that's okay because it's just an awareness. It's back to the film analogy. It's like the white light that goes through the film that projects these characters onto the screen. If there were no film running through it, there would just be the pure white light, and that's okay too. But the real catalyst for me was a period in my life when everything really fell apart for me. I'd had a challenging childhood, and that childhood had left me with this real tenacious drive to prove myself, despite inwardly believing myself to be utterly worthless, and gave me a really tenacious drive, which started out in the theatre and performance and that kind of stuff, ended up in an entrepreneurial space in the world of marketing, where I set up with a friend a marketing agency, which we built up over 17 years to become a very successful marketing company. And all of the time I was going away from this sense of inadequacy, this sense of being a fake. I was a creative director, and our clients were people like British Airways and Microsoft and sorts of wonderful clients. But I still felt like I was a kind of a fake, trying to prove myself to someone, to the world, and kind of justify the space I was taking up in the world. And so what I did was my solution to it was create external actualization points, sort of things I'd move toward externally that would then show everybody that I wasn't a fake, that I was good enough and I could do what I wanted to do. I could own the space that I took up in the world. And always thought to myself, right, when we get to the point where we sell this company and we make a load of money and I've got an Aston Martin and I've got a boat in Spain and I've got a great big house and loads of money in the bank, then I would have proven to the world that I am enough, I've got enough, and I will be at peace. I will find the peace that I'm looking for. Well, in 2008, we sold the company for a lot of money. I had an Aston Martin DB9 in the drive. I had a big boat in Spain and a big house. But I also had a cocaine addiction, alcohol addiction, and my life literally fell apart. And I was left in this space of thinking, what's all this all about then? I have everything, literally everything. Obviously, it's all different levels, but literally everything that society tells you should have in order to lead a fulfilling and rewarding and wonderful life. But I didn't even want to be in life. It was only the fact that I got 3 kids, I couldn't really exit it. So that was another trap. And as a result of that horrendous realization with suicidal ideations, I went into rehab twice, secure mental hospital with suicidal ideations. Everything was just, but outwardly, it's like, what? He's got all this stuff. And that began this journey of saying, if it's not about that, which it clearly isn't, what is it about? And that's when I started exploring anything and everything I could find about to give me insights into the truths about how we human beings work. And that was ancient intuitive wisdom and meditation and spiritual inquiry on one side, and modern empirical science, quantum physics, philosophy on the other side. What are the clues? Give me this stuff. And it was literally existential for me. And I deliberately, something in me told me not simply to go down a specific route, but to eclectically pull together whatever I felt drawn to, because there was something in me that said they're all talking about exactly the same thing. They're just using different language. Some are contained and framed within this particular paradigm. And I was desperate enough to be able to understand that maybe this paradigm as we experience it is not all that there is, but I don't know. Let's find out. And as I started to explore things in quantum physics, like quantum field theory and superposition and the famous double slit experiment and the observer effect, I thought, oh, actually, that's not written in stone the way it's presented to us as being empirically written in stone. And given that the exploration of this stuff is necessarily constrained by our ability to conceive of it, so therefore our models and our theses are going to be constrained within that. It was even Einstein said that intuition is more important than knowledge. So in other words, he was pointing to there is a deeper something, don't know what it is, and we probably could never name what it is. The Tao Te Ching, the first line of the Tao Te Ching is the Tao, consciousness. The Tao that can be named is not the Tao. In other words, it cannot be defined within this context. And over here, spirituality and Buddhism, particularly for me, that had a kind of a spaciousness that meant I didn't have to define it. I see, I'm also dyslexic, which I think really helps because it means that it doesn't have to necessarily be a binary link between one thing and another. I can dwell in the ambiguity. I love that. And so I started to explore this eclectic mix with this sense of rather a bicycle wheel. They're all out there on the circumference, but the hub, the axle, that's where we're going. That's the journey we're on. And my way of exploring it was through writing. My father was a fantastic, incredible writer, beautiful writer. And the work that I'd done as a classical actor in Shakespeare had given me this relationship with language and words and this understanding that real meaning lay in what actors call the subtexts and what poets call the space between words, or as I like to say it, the space between what we make things mean. And it's rather that moment when a fantastic, beautiful symphony just finishes and there's that silence. That's it. That's it. In fact, there was I can't remember his name, a famous guru. His koan was called the One Finger Koan. And all he would do is he would simply, and that was the teaching. And I have to say, I've used that many times when I've been in these conversations. But if it's not that, what is it? And you can say as many times as you want, oh, it's this is it. It's like this. Or then in acting, we use this, there's a technique called the upward inflection, whereby you'll be in the middle of a sentence and what you'll do is what I've just done, you'll create an upward inflection, which means that no one's going to interrupt you because something's coming. There it is. That's it.
It's beautifully articulated. And I think what we're trying to do here is put language around something that actually just is that. And the greatest teaching, if I read someone like Sri Ramana Maharshi, he says, just come and be silent with me. That's his highest teaching, is silence. And then if you must require me to speak, then I will speak.
Well, his teacher, I was at his ashram actually a couple of months ago. Incredible. And you can still actually go to the cave where he spent 17 years and you can meditate in there. Quite incredible. But his core teaching was, who am I? And the analogy he used to use was, who am I? The question, who am I, is like a stick you use to stir the fire. And you just keep stirring the fire with that stick, with that question, who am I, until the stick disappears. And so that's pointing to exactly the same thing. In other words, if you need me to speak, I will speak, but you really don't need me to speak.
I love the purity of that teaching, right? And I've spent a number of years practicing those sorts of Eastern, more ascending type, up and out of this reality type practices. And I tend to get moments of absolute peace and beautiful clarity. And then what you described before comes for me, which is my wounded inner child that says, yeah, you've realized that the material success in career is not important, but now you're trying to do this podcast thing and do a little bit more, and you're doing the spirituality stuff. And suddenly it's co-opted that into its game of trying to be better than everyone else and trying to get ahead. And so again, everywhere I look is the work to be done in the descent into the depths. And you write about this, saying the end of suffering is true suffering. The challenges and struggles we all so desperately try to avoid are not to be wished away. They're the food that feeds your future growth if you have the courage to devour them completely. And so I would love to hear about that side of it, because when I hear Ramana Maharshi and lots of people, there are these Advaita Vedanta, or the direct path practitioners everywhere now, mostly male in my thing, and all they say is, you don't exist, you're not real, you're an illusion, so just get with the program and so suffering will end immediately. Right? And I'm looking at a 21-year-old kid say this, right? And I'm just thinking, what about the ancestral trauma? What about the pain that came through my grandfather's line? What about the things that happened to my dad, to me, what about all that? And then what about all the juice of life? What about the passion? Like, I want to make love to my partner. What about the soul and the richness and the poetry and the laughter? And what about all of that? And I see there can be a clinicalness to the everything is an illusion. I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Imagine what it would be like, Kian, to be able to experience the pain and the pleasure with absolute equanimity. Because really what's happening is you're experiencing experience. And that's transcendent. Whether it is stubbing your toe against a rock or feeling the tender kiss of your partner on your cheek. What's beyond the story we create about stubbing my toe against a rock, or the story we create about being kissed by my partner on my cheek? What's beyond that? Where does that come from, if you like? We end up having to create orientations, and there really are no orientations. But what's the genesis of that is nascent pure potential that we talked of earlier. Imagine being in the experience of the birthing of potential into form. That. The rest is just a story. I stubbed my toe, it hurts. I did a lovely exercise, if you like, whatever. I wanted to understand more, and I want to talk about manifesting as well, because what you touched on before. I wanted to find out more about these stories we make up that makes things, I want to experience more of that, and I want to experience less of that. What's happening here is I just use the word, the magic of being. So we can stop there. Being. Like, if you were to, the easiest to think about your hand, just hold your hand up in the air. And what I want you to do is close your eyes and then be curious about what is it that allows you to know that your hand is there. And you can notice there's a kind of an energy in there. The nerve endings, the blood doing the things that are blood doing. But go beyond that, and there's some sense, some essence, some energetic that lets you know that there is this thing, this experiencing of what you're calling a hand, and the hand is there even though you can't see it. So experiencing is there without the actual visual content of it being there. Okay. So you can settle that back down now. What makes it a hand is the story we tell ourselves, because we know it's a hand. Our model of the world has been codified in such a way. We know it's a hand, we know how it works and all the rest of it. When you look at a baby, I remember once with my youngest son, it was very funny when he first noticed that he had a willy. He was a little baby and he got really upset by this appendage that was there that he hadn't noticed before. And you can see your kids like getting curious about their hand, because it's not hand at that particular point. It's just an arising in their awareness, an arising in their consciousness. It becomes a hand, and the story we tell ourselves about the hand later on, and therefore, in a strange way, the hand disappears. There's, again, a lovely teaching that says, when you give a child the name of the bird will disappear. And that's really sad, because the magic and wonderment of So the first sighting of a bird, whereas now, oh, yeah, lovely, the birds, aren't they? Yeah, nice. I think one of them's just crapped on it. Oh, bloody hell. Do you know what I mean? The wonderment disappears for us. So I conducted this little experiment to get underneath the stories that was really simple. It just involved taking a cold shower. And you know what it's like when you get into and you have a cold shower, the hot water doesn't come through. It's, oh my God, oh, thank God for that. Here comes the warm water. Oh, that's better. So a really lovely example of a towards and away from what I don't want, what I do want. What I used to do is I used to get into the shower, and before I turn it on, I would go, okay, I'm about to turn on the shower, and there's an experience is going to happen. And I'm going to be curious about that experience. Okay. I'm not going to put any stories on it or anything like that. And so I'd turn the shower on. Initially, there'd be a little jolt because your body is doing certain things. But once that jolt had happened, I didn't then continue that story. I just experienced the pressure impressions of the water. There was an energy. There was a something that was there, where there was a difference between the temperature of my skin and the temperature of the stuff that was going on it. But I wasn't quite sure whether that was hot or cold. And so the story of cold had, and therefore avoid it and not very nice, disappeared. And I was simply in the presence of experiencing without the stories. And whilst, of course, at the level of form and all the rest of it, stubbing your toe is a significantly different experience to being kissed beautifully on the cheek by your partner. But that's when our awareness is at this level. Take your awareness into that space of, and again, who was it who said this one? I'm very bad at remembering names, as you can tell. Anyway, I can't remember who it was. One of their famous teachings was, I don't mind what happens. How liberating is that? I don't mind what happens. And having been where I've been, yeah, I don't mind what happens. I mean, I do. I get wrapped up. I get caught in all of this stuff because I'm not an awakened being. But I can glimpse what the experience of being an awakened conscious being in this temporary arising is like for those beautiful souls that are awakened.
I think this is really an interesting intersection because on the one hand, a lot of the reasons why you made so many positive changes in your life was because of the rock bottom experience, right?
Yeah.
And then you get to a certain stage and your awareness jumps to a certain level where you say, actually, I know that I should surrender to the way that things are and accept them totally. And in doing so, liberation will be mine. And you're trying to continuously get to that zenith or get to that space and hold it for longer and longer, then let go of the things that are stopping you. But yet there's this, where's the space then for discerning what to do, what not to do in the world? And whereas, let's say I'm in a job that I don't like, I'm in a relationship that's abusive, or I'm somehow in another situation where it would be better for me to get out of that. But yet I'm saying this must be where I'm meant to be, and I just drop back into a space of awareness. What's that like?
No, but the purpose of the suffering is not the endurance of the suffering. The purpose of the suffering is to crack open the illusion, almost to lead to a kind of intolerance of the suffering, such that you turn back to it. I have had enough. I am not going to run away from you and give you my back and live in fear and try to distract myself away. I have had enough. What is it? What is it that you're trying to say? What is it that you're trying to teach me? Now, there was a lot of anger came out in the way I just expressed that, and it doesn't have to be anger. It can be looked on as This is what didn't give you up. This is a friend that wouldn't let you down, that wouldn't let you smudge away from it. So it's a turning toward that suffering, and fully, as a retreat I'm developing, a retreat program I'm developing. It's called Phoenix Rising. And the whole idea is literally, as Phoenix Rising suggests, is to turn toward those struggles and those pains and those issues and those challenges, and fully accept them and seek out the insights and the lessons that are contained within them. And the process that sits at the heart of it is called the alchemy process, which is made up of 3 steps: ARC, acceptance, responsibility, curiosity. So there's the suffering. Stop running from it. Accept that it's there. Fully accept that it's there. In other words, as an alcoholic, I've been in recovery for 10 years. I had to fully accept that I was addicted to alcohol for various reasons, and to find out what those reasons were. But I had to fully accept that was the situation. I couldn't pretend to myself. But there's a way of fully accepting things, which doesn't mean you have to cover yourself in the crap. There's a way of fully accepting things that is more like, imagine yourself arriving at a beautiful forest pool, and it's lovely and clear and gorgeous, and you want to get a kind of closer a look. So you come a little bit closer and you kind of step into it. But in stepping into it, you stir up all of the sediment that's at the bottom. And it's like, oh, damn. And you try and push the sediment down, and and of course you can't. By doing that, you're simply stirring up more sediment. What you have to do, the only thing you can do, is fully accept that, okay, I stepped into the pool, I accept that, and I'm just going to allow. I'm going to allow the sediment to settle. I'm going to be with it, not fighting it, not resisting it, not wishing it was something else, because that fight, that resistance, that wishing, that's just like the waving your arms around. It's just stirring up more sediment. Full acceptance, and allow the sediment to settle, and there will be this clarity. If you're an abused man or woman in a relationship, and you're not either trying to justify it or feel like you're a prisoner to it or a victim to it, you're just fully accepting it is there. I am actually being abused in this relationship, and I can look in the mirror and I can see it, or I can look in my memory of what's been said and I can hear it. I'm going to fully accept that this is here, and not wishing it to be any other way than it is, because that's foolishness, because it is how it is. That full acceptance gives me this incredible clarity. I can see it for what it is. There's almost a sort of well, you'll know this from from the psychotherapy and psychology. There's a sort of a distancing that takes place. You're able to dissociate yourself, and therefore, in therapy terms, empathy is great. Sympathy drowns you. So in therapeutic terms, you've got to enable yourself to have that position where you can feel and understand and see and know, but you're not wrapped up in it, so that you've got a really clear perspective. So this is a way of giving yourself that really clear perspective. There's the struggle. I'm addicted to alcohol. I've got a horrendous cocaine habit. I want to kill myself. Look at that. Be with that curled up in the 3 a.m. coital pain. Of course, I don't want it to be there, but if I can accept that it is there because it is, okay, now what am I going to do about it? And that's where the second bit, the responsibility, comes in. You own it. Okay, this is an experience that's happening to me, and it's actually coming from me. I'm generating this, back to this idea of this controlled hallucination, and that's both in empirical neuroscience and in Eastern spiritual traditions. I'm creating, this is my awareness that's manifesting this moment. So I'm going to take radical responsibility for this being how it is. So let's go back to the man or woman in the abusive relationship. Yes, I'm being abused. I can see that. And I'm not going to draw myself into the emotion of all of that, because then I get lost. Okay, I'm going to be the psychotherapist. I can say, okay, now I'm going to own this. I'm the one that is allowing this to happen. I'm going to take back Or by taking radical responsibility, I take back all of the levers, all of the controls, all of the buttons. They're now within me. I can now do something about them, which is where the third stage, curiosity, comes in. And the question you ask yourself, and this is the question that came to me back in those dark days, or the statement really followed by a question, which is everything that happens to benefit me. My job now is to find out what it is. So if I'm the person that's in an abusive relationship, or I'm the person who's suicidal, or just mildly, I'm the person that's just like really pissed off and I can't work out why my relationship's not working properly. You think, okay, this is happening to benefit me. What is it? And then you get intensely curious and then seek out whatever flavor, shape, or coloring of insights suits your predisposition, because they're all pointing to the same thing. And you seek out those insights and take action as a result of that. So it sounds like a very long process, but it really can happen in a single flourishing thought. And that just recognition, accept things for how they are, take radical responsibility for it, get curious about why it's here. What's its purpose? How is it to benefit me? That, I think, would be, yeah.
Is beautifully put and described. And it's been my experience in learning to teach people how to do this work, but also mainly doing this work on myself from a psychotherapeutic perspective, first of all, that life brings you what you're ready to deal with now. Because I think one of the biggest fears is, I'm not capable of looking at that and holding it. The pain is too great. It would break me. And I think one of the most hopeful things that I've uncovered in my life is that pain is actually custom made and just beautifully placed to you, maybe even by your higher self, in order to awaken you. And you come to this realization that things are happening for you, not to you.
Beautiful.
And there's something in what you said about accessing a level of awareness that you can actually see and hold this thing, because I actually think that what you've articulated is not that different from the spaciousness, this kind of non-dual spaciousness that you're practicing. It's almost like you're now directing that open awareness and you're observing that smaller part of yourself. If you truly are that I am, that is that huge space of awareness, rather than saying that the pattern of trauma or the Tom who's suffering is an illusion, I find it much more beneficial to say, this is also me, but just a smaller part of me that's been damaged or broken in a certain way. Yes, it's an illusion in the fact that it is masquerading as the true me, but yet the loving, kind intention towards it is really part of the healing process. And
Beautiful.
I've often found that trying to get to that loving awareness inside yourself can be particularly difficult if you have been abused, or if, as you said, you've always been taught that you are never good enough. And so I'd be interested to know your reaction to that, but also in how you've managed to cultivate that loving awareness space of transformation.
Lovely, beautifully expressed. And yeah, that model of the younger me, the pain body, or could be articulated in many different ways, is really useful because we can get it, we can relate to it. That voice that we have in our head, the way it talks to us, you imagine that voice and then imagine using that tone of voice to your partner or to a young child who is your younger self. It would be, if you voiced that out loud, it'd be horrendous. And so that model that you described there about this smaller me, this younger me that brings around this kind of delicacy of touch and all the rest of it, it's a really lovely model. It's a really lovely way of being able to enable others to relate to what we're talking about without the need for any kind of transcendental visualization or the need to begin to admit into their mind there is this sense that I am a chimera, and the essential me is an illusion that only comes into being in the very moment of awareness. That's a lot to take. It's a lot to take on board there. But that's what's going to come at the end as you progress through this. And what happens is, as I have been told, is that there ends up being this sweeping back to utter normalcy. And that then the life that you're leading and living is lived within this paradigm, utterly understanding that this here is a table and that there's a microphone and that's a screen and all the rest of it. And I don't even need to go into this sort of convoluted understanding of the nature of things, because it is all absorbed and taken in, knowing that I am the watcher of the movie, to use our previous analogy, which expressed in more lyric spiritual terms would be knowing that I am awareness. But if we say I am the watcher of the movie, or I am the parent to my inner child, oh, great, I can get that. I can get that. And I can understand that. And then that can begin to give me a somatic experience of being able to love yourself in the way that you would love another that you cared about. And this takes us back to the insight that awakening isn't something that can be thought out or understood. It's not about understanding awakening. It's a feeling. And even the feeling is territory, but it's in that kind of somatic layer, if you like, that we get closer to it, because we're away from the words and the concepts and in the same. A journalist will use words in one way, a poet will use words in another way, and they'll be performing different jobs. The poet, though, will take you into an existential insight and understanding in which and from which there is enormous peace.
Yeah, yeah, because I'd love to get to that, to the practicalities of it, because I think this stuff can be quite linguistic, and then the practice is where the juice is. Yeah. How do you go about practicing that, and what's your journey been there?
Moment to moment. It really is remembering to do that. It's like a few years back for me, I was articulating it myself by talking about taking it up off of the cushion. I do a lot of meditation, and that's lovely and it's beautiful. Sometimes it's noisy and whatever. I've got ADHD, so my mind is all the time in often default mode network. It's about taking it. How is it taken off of the cushion? How is it exercised in amongst the muck and bullets of day-to-day living? And the biggest thing that helped me was I gave myself this little phrase, this little mantra, which was slow down and notice. I've written a piece called The Noticer, which points towards this depth and quality of experience that's in and around us all of the time, but most of us never really notice it. And it doesn't cost you anything, no more time, there's no investment, whatever, but the quality of the life you experience is transformed simply by becoming a noticer. And what I started to notice was I was about getting stuff done. And so if I have things to do during the day and there's a to-do list or whatever, like with you, you'll have to be editing this and doing all various things that you're going to have to do with your podcast. You'll be thinking about all the other things, and that can get woohoo like that. And we end up being it's not about a to-do list. We actually should be calling it a to-done list. I've got a list of things that I'm craving were done. This list is not about doing, this is about being done. And so whenever I'm in the midst of doing any one given thing on that, I'm actually in the action of trying to get it completed as quickly as I possibly can, so it's done and I can get on to the next one. And therefore, I completely miss the doing of it. And I'm just literally end gaining. So for me, it might be a good example would be I don't know, a screw on a light switch has come loose. I need to fix it. I get a screwdriver out of the drawer. It's not the right screwdriver. I've got to go over to one of the buildings over there and go and get the screwdriver. I'm almost running to go and get the screwdriver to come back. And then I'm thinking about, maybe whilst I'm walking over there, why don't I do this thing that's over in that direction, and that could be completed and whatever. And so I'm never really present. I'm always half doing something, always rushing to complete something or to try and be as efficient as possible with my time. what I introduced was this idea of slow down and notice. And so the light switch, I need the star-shaped screwdriver. Okay, that's over in that. Okay. And then I'm not going to get the screwdriver. I'm just walking. As a result of that walking, at some point, I'll be getting a screwdriver, and then I'll be doing a walk back, and then I'll be sorting out the light. And what it means is, whilst I'm walking, I'm noticing. Isn't it clever? These clever little star-shaped screws, and that really isn't, because they don't rip as much as the other ones do. That's clever. So you're much more in the moment. So that slow down and notice enables you to be in the moment. And therefore, imagine a stone. You're at a beautiful, calm lake, and you've got a beautiful, flat stone. And you throw it, and it skims across the surface. That's us doing our jobs. It looks beautiful. It's great. Ba, 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 ba. But imagine what happens to that stone at the end. It stops, and it starts to sink, and it settles down, and it goes down and down and down and down and down. And all that depth of experience is there just at the very end. That depth of experience has been there in all those skipping moments, but never experienced. And it doesn't take any more time or energy or commitment to experience this depth of being that happens in any given moment. Somebody once asked me, I was talking about my meditation habit, and they were saying, you spend 2 hours a day meditating? God, I'm too busy for that. There's got so much to do. And I said, my experience of it is that the remaining 14 hours of the day are actually doubled or trebled or quadrupled or exponentially expanded in terms of my quality of the experience of it. So for 2 days, 2 hours of meditating, I actually get a 48-hour day, or whatever it is, basis the quality of my experience. And then what happens is, as the slow down and notice, now rather than going to get the screwdriver and coming back and having this feeling of anxiety and pressure, I've got to complete it, what I'm actually doing for the same thing, and in practical reality terms, it's probably 15 seconds additional time, what I'm actually doing is I'm experiencing these little, noticing, where the light is falling on that thing there, or breathing, or just simply that shoulders relaxed feeling of just walking, to experiencing that quality of simply being. And that has a somatic valence. There is an experienceable something which is just simply, the being aliveness of it. And that is beautiful. And so then what happens is, as you keep doing this, starting by just simply slow down and notice, you start to you create this space for that pure experience of being to come into your life. And slowly, that can become the place from which you live your life. You don't live your life from the place of having to go and get a screwdriver and do a thing, and therefore you're completely unconscious. You experience this experience of living increasingly from that place of being. And that's what happens. By no means is it all of the time. I get hooked up and caught up, but a good amount of my time is from the place of simply being. When I was talking to a friend of mine, I've got a couple of lovely friends who I have lovely long conversations with each week on Zoom. I was talking to one of them, and we were talking about writing and creating pieces that you're then going to share, and how this idea of feeling you need to or want to or have to share them ends up colouring what it is you're doing. You then start shaping up what you're doing from a point of view of what people might like, or what might be successful, or whatever. You become externally actualized, which I think you were pointing towards when you're talking about all of those manifesting those various things. If, however, you stop writing a script to make a video that I can put on TikTok, and you simply write to write, I'm writing to write. The words are still going to flow. Everything's still going to happen. But my intentionality is not around the completion. I'm not absenting the moment, looking toward the kind of, all right, then I've got, how am I going to edit that? Or as in this conversation, I'm lucky that I don't have to think about what you're going to do with this afterwards. You do, but you can engage in this conversation for the conversation, as opposed to being in the conversation because I'm creating what I hope is going to be a good podcast.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to zone in on this actually and draw real attention to it, because there's a feeling that I have had in the last, say, 10 years of seeking after this, that it will just snap and happen. It's
Right.
as if when you listen and you read spiritual text, you think these people are putting in no effort. They're just effortlessly being in that space. And what I'm actually hearing from you, and that's been my experience as well, is there's a very deliberate intentionality to practice on the mat. And then once you've developed some capability there, is when you come off the mat, there is a deliberate intention to be present. And then whenever you get drawn away, there's a coming back. And there's a dedication there to making that pursuit and that way of being the most important thing. Because in order to do that, you do have to deprioritize things. Because if you're worried about getting this screwdriver and running around and you're under time pressure, you do have to accept that this is going to take me longer. And you do have to accept that I'm going to write this and nobody might read it, or it may not be the formula that people want to read. And you do also then have to really start doing the emotional work, because after a while of realizing, why am I so panicked when I'm simply just doing a little DIY job around the house? And you look at something like your ARC process, which is, okay, I'm accepting now that I'm really panicked and I'm taking complete responsibility for that. And now I'm curious as to what would that have been? And maybe it's, for me growing up, whenever any work was to be done, it was to be done at high speed, because my dad grew up on a farm, and in farms things are done at pace, and in countryside Ireland. And so now when I'm going to do something simple DIY around the house, for years I was running around here like a headless lunatic, like off my head on cortisol, because that's how work happens, right?
Yeah.
And so there's actually this very deliberate commitment to prioritizing that. And I'd love to hear from you, what do you then have to give up in order to prioritize that?
I think the entry point to this is more to do with the perspective you take on the challenge, let's say. What is it that tells you that you are not already awake? It's already there. It's already happened. And all you're doing is covering it up. It's back to the piece that you read earlier. It's the clouds, the constant clouds of craving. The blue sky is always there on a slate grey Irish winter morning. Lovely though they are, but the blue sky is there. But we make the assumption that it's not. We make the assumption that we somehow got to make the blue sky. And in that analogy, it's like plainly ridiculous. You have to make the blue sky. You just got to wait for the clouds. Just got to wait for a nice sunny day. It'll be here. And that's the perspective, that it's already there. And what it's a process of it's not a process of acquiring anything. It's a process of evaporating that which is getting in the way. And so acceptance, responsibility, curiosity. Okay. I'm allowing myself to run around because I've been inculcated by my green and pleasant days growing up on the farm with Dad. And okay, that behavior is hardwired into my model of the world. Okay, my model of the world is simply a model of the world, which is a construct and only has its reality when I allow it to have its reality. So I fully accept that's what's going on at the moment, and I can see why it's happening. I take responsibility for that. And then I get curious about why it's there, because it could be there. Because the real thing is not why it's there, but why it's causing the feeling in you that it's causing. The thing itself is irrelevant. It's what you feel or think about it that makes a difference. So to your dad, that feeling would have been great. I've got me the energy. I'm going to get a lot done today. When I'm home from a tea, I'm feeling great because the jobs have been done. And so that cortisol is less, not even cortisol. That's just the energy of getting stuff done. That's fantastic. But for when we look at it and there's resistance there, or there's this sense of we're labeling this thing, much like the cold water in the shower, we're labeling this feeling as being an unhappy, less than content experience of living, then I'm labeling it that. I'm putting that there. I'm causing that to happen, to be my experience of this given moment. And if I can recognize that is no more ever present than the clouds that are covering up the blue sky, then I can start to just allow those clouds to part. That which I'm seeking to be, I actually already am, so I don't need to seek it anymore. A lovely exercise is to, we'll just imagine ourselves doing this for now. Imagine yourself standing up with your feet together. And I say to you, okay, Kieran, what I'd like you to do, I'd like you to take one step, but that step needs to take you closer to where you are. Off you go. And you want to lift your foot, you want to do it, and everything in this materialized world says, go get it. You know, that which you seek, the happiness you seek is out there somewhere. And when you get it, you will experience that happiness. Whereas the reality of what's happening is that because you think the happiness you seek is out there in that new car, and when you get that new car, you feel happy. You think, there you go, proof, it worked. That isn't what happened. What happened was you thought happiness was in getting that new car. So you had craving alive inside you, and you were dissatisfied with how your situation was, because it by definition wasn't happiness because I don't have the car. So I have this craving inside me, and it's causing me unhappiness because I haven't got the car. You get the car, what happens? The craving drops away. So the feeling you're having is the feeling of what it's like to not have that craving in your life, to let go of wanting things to be other than they actually are. It's like this. And no big surprise, a couple of months down the line of having your new car, the feeling is not giving you the happiness anymore. It never did. It's the absence of the unhappiness, or the absence of the craving that brings us about this contentment. So in other words, really bizarrely, it's the absence of wanting to awaken that creates the space that allows you to realize that you're already awake. You could be nothing other than completely and utterly awake. Everything else, it's like a canvas painted by a great artist wishing that it was a blank canvas. It is still a blank canvas. It's just underneath the paint, and that paint can be beautiful or ugly, or you can like it or not like it. It's what we most essentially are. Back to the film projection, a screen. Imagine the movie being projected onto the screen. Pure consciousness, pure awareness is the screen, absent of the craving colors of the films projected onto it, and the stories and the narratives and the things we make them mean. We are all already the pure white light of being and of consciousness. But I nearly swore then, but flipping heck, doesn't that seem boring? It's like, from this place of materialistic craving, yes, it does. But from that place, as you'll know from your meditation practice and others who have meditated who have those glimpses, it's like words like love can't even get close to explaining it. They talk about moksha. I can't remember what tradition. They talk about it being like a droplet of bliss in an ocean of bliss. So we think of ourselves as it's love, pure love, it's love. Okay, great, that's a word, but it's a word that's limiting it. What if the word love and what we know to be the most excellent expression and feeling of love were like a droplet of water in an ocean? And the real experience of what you're calling love is the unbearable, that wonderful title of that film, The Unbearable Lightness of Being. The Man Who Saw Too Much, again, that lovely film. Unbearably beautiful. Which is why you end up in this, the Buddha's articulation of it was emptiness. He turned over his bowl and that was it. But it's, those of us who have glimpsed it, I could weep right now. And that's there. When you're walking to get the screwdriver, that's there.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. It's like everything that you ever thought was a problem has just disappeared. And you can't imagine what having a problem is even. And yet, it's like I was reading a spiritual text earlier, and one of the people came to, I think it was Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj, came to him and said, I feel like a lift boy. I go down and I go up, and I go down and I go up, and I go down and I go up, I go down and I go up, whereas you seem to be steady and stable. And I feel like that lift boy going down and going up. And sometimes it feels to me, at least, that the going down and the forgetting leads to a learning and then another period of up, followed by a deeper drop. And at the moment, for example, I had an experience last week where I did some work, in the work that I do in corporate work, and the client wasn't happy with the session that we did and sent an email to say such. And I knew it wasn't on point for multiple reasons. But it hit me, Tom, in my heart like a hammer. And I was on the plane flying to the next client gig. And I was just on the plane, and the poor person next to me, but I'm sitting there and I'm just fully in this sensation in my heart. And I can feel it like as if someone has a hand on my heart and they're just squeezing it, and I'm almost breathless, but I'm just holding it and I'm holding it and I'm giving it undivided attention. And then every memory of every time I had failed in sports, in school, with parents is just flashing through my mind. And then every memory of any time I've been in trouble with a teacher, right, in trouble with a parent, and these things were just like coming up and just out of my nervous system as I just held it and like for an hour, and I'm dry sobbing, and he, like the person next to me is probably, what is something wrong with this young fella? But that seems necessary for me, at least on my path, to then create space for me to be able to be, as the Buddha said, emptiness. And I just see a lot of people talking now about the high states, but not acknowledging, as you said, curled up in the fetal position at 3 a.m. in a cell, parts of it. And I'm wondering, is that necessary in all parts, or how do you think about?
I think it is. You look at the Four Noble Truths, the teaching that came from the Buddha's awakening. Life is suffering. So suffering doesn't translate it as unsatisfactoriness, or life is, yeah. It could be that. It's like it's suboptimal, to use sort of more corporate lingo. Life is suboptimal, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. There is an end of suffering. He articulated the Eightfold Path, certain ways of being able to approach the experience of life and living, and the choices that we make will then enable you to, as we've been articulating it, turn toward that suffering and go through it. The end of suffering is through suffering. So it has a purpose, a powerful purpose. I look at my addiction, and 2 trips through rehab, the second one worked, and I got into AA and did the 12-step program. If I wasn't an alcoholic that wanted to kill himself, I wouldn't have gone through the 12-step program. And the 12-step program, for anyone who doesn't know of it, is an incredible model for the living of your life. It's the fellowship's version of the Eightfold Path. It's a path of incredible honesty and personal responsibility and ownership of what's happening, but also a recognition that it is not just the you here. They talk about it being a power greater than yourself, which is anything you want it to be. But it's this real understanding that this thing that is you, that is going through these stories of pain and suffering and all of the rest of it, that's a construct. That's something that you're creating in the moment. That's the clouds that's covering over. Now, it feels real and it feels like you've got no control over it, just like it feels we've got no control over what the weather's going to be like tomorrow. And for Tom to say, oh, you do, is May, yeah, whatever. But we've got to remember that we're at a different paradigm level. In the same way that you could be half awake in the middle of the night and you look up and you think, gee, there's someone coming through the door. And you're full of panic and worry and all the rest of it. And then you realize, oh, no, that's my dressing gown hanging on the back of the door. Now, what you've constructed inside you is an absolute real reality. There's someone coming through your bedroom door, and your whole experience of that moment manifests itself as if that was true. All of the various bodily chemicals, sensory acuity, all the rest of it kick off in order to create that, what's necessary for you to deal with that reality, until you realize it's actually my dressing gown hanging on the back of the door, and you laugh and relax. And now that's your new reality. Okay, what happened to the man who's coming through the door? What happened to him? He wasn't there. He was an illusion. Okay. In the moment, was he there? Sure. So there are ways of being able to access this notion of this sort of illusory self-constructed reality. The reality that we experience is a reality that we create literally on the fly, moment by moment. And it's so convincing that we assume it to be the fundamental reality, the absolute bottom line truth of what is. Whereas a tiny shift in perspective and the place from which you're viewing the events and conditions of your life creates a fundamental shift in the quality and the nature of your experiencing of it, which makes the journey we take and the inquiry of it so wonderfully compelling, because it causes you to get rid of the for grantedness. And therefore, when you're in situations where you're being triggered, and as you were on that flight, and all of the other incidents buried there in your model of the world that resonate at the same frequency as that experience, they come to play. And therefore, they bring about all those physiological things, just like the man coming through your bedroom door at night. Now, you have a choice. You can say, okay, what's really happening here as I think about these moments from my past, including the client saying that session was rubbish? What's actually going on? What's actually going on is a present moment thought. That's all that's happening. It's a present moment thought, whether it's a present moment thought that's labeled the session finished a day ago, or whether it's a present moment thought labeled what happened in my childhood. It's a present moment thought, and it has the potency and the power, like with the man coming into your room, or the dressing gown, or the dressing gown on the back of the door. And that level of insight, this is where it seems when we talk in spiritual terms about the illusion of self and all the rest of it, it seems like esoterica. And where's the utility in that, for goodness sake? The utility in that is exactly here. It's exactly here. It's at this point where you can recognize that everything you're experiencing is a construct of this very limited mind. Now, it might be a very useful and necessary construct, like how do I turn left at some traffic lights without knocking anybody over in my car? Or it could be a very unuseful construct, like sitting in the middle of a plane and all the rest of it, that is just making you so absent from the ability to garner any lessons or insights that are there actually, that back to the curiosity level, that are that's the reason for you that this client went, yeah, do you know what? You knew that the session wasn't absolutely on point. The opportunity to harvest those on pointnesses is getting clouded over. The blue sky of the on pointedness, that's hard to say. The blue skyness of the on unpointedness is just being clouded out by a different present moment thought that we call a memory, and give it such power because it says something about us, and that takes you into identity. It says something about who I am. Okay, what's your identity? It's a present moment thought. That's what it is.
Yeah. And having the right tools, as you've described and I've described, to deal with those things when they do come up rather than having to suppress them, I think is one of the most beautiful things about psychology and therapy and spirituality becoming a little bit more mainstream, because now I think there are more people waking up to the idea of turning towards that rather than turning away. And sorry, the bit I was curious about, we've talked a lot about ourselves and handling ourselves. What are we to do with those pesky other humans who come in and they're not doing any of the work, and we're the ones, we're alchemizing, right? Everything that's coming up, and we're saying, wow, this is all a mirror to me, don't shoot the messenger. But yet they're going around stomping their egos all over the place. What's been your experience there?
Let them. You've got two heads and you're ugly, Kian. Let them. You're only the victim of your own meaning, not their meaning. They can say what they want. Okay. It's like I spoke earlier about I don't mind what happens, but I use that in coaching references. I encourage people just to use those two letters. Okay. What you did was this, it was rubbish. Okay. So the client, it wasn't on point. Okay, I heard that. Thank you. Okay. What are you going to do about it? I'm going to absorb what you shared with me. I'm going to reflect on it, and I'll come back to you. Okay. I get it. Thank you. I get it. Okay. You shouldn't have done that. That's my parking space. I've got my hospital appointment. Okay. Now, what do you mean? I've got every right to park here. I was here before you. Oh, now I'm involved in the story. Okay, maybe he has got his appointment on the Okay. Have the parking space, or whatever action you would choose to do after that, even if you okay, but lock my car, walk away. Okay. And it's let them. It's a story. They're projecting their story. You're interpreting their story. And given whatever emotional valence they're projecting onto you, the extent to which it's triggering with stories and codifications that you have inside your model of the world. And that's where it becomes transcendent, because if you can, that lovely poem, if you can take all of these imposters and treat them all the same. So for Kian to have that guy's comments about the session trigger all of those things, thank you. So rather than sitting there and dry sobbing, which is necessary, that was necessary at that particular point because it happened. Okay. Wow. This got triggered. Thank you. Responsibility, curiosity, everything that happens to. So now, the reason that guy didn't like the session, the reason it was off point by your own admission. Okay. Thank you. And you needn't say, this is going to be tough to, right, okay, now I've got to go through this, I'll get into therapy, I'll do that. They're all just stories. Okay. Because I can have that same dissociation from that moment of him saying the session wasn't really good enough and no, I really wasn't on point, I can carry that dissociation with me to start to look at some of these really deeper traumas. And they're present, we don't need to go into them, they're present in my childhood, things that happened that really should never have happened, but what's never should have happened. I look at that, all the things that happened to me during my addiction and the recovery process. I look back at them now with genuine gratitude, genuine gratitude. I'm living a life beyond my wildest dreams now because I was forced, my feet were held to the fire by the suffering in order to become existentially curious about what is the nature of what it is to be a conscious being. And find myself now in a place where, in being curious about these things, I end up in conversations with you and other people I'm in conversations with, or I write things that I put out there and a couple of people see and it resonates with them. I get to humbly play my part in the evolution of our consciousness as a species. And if every one of us just did that, just moved the needle one tiny bit, imagine the kind of world we'd be creating to hand on to future generations. And that's it, and it comes from every moment. Slow down and notice. And from there, the old thing of the acorn holds everything that's required to become this magnificent oak. A single stem cell of a human being holds, that's remarkable, everything that's required to create a human being and the perception of this thing we call the world. And so if each one of us, and you with this this wonderful podcast you're starting to put out there, which I just admire you so much for, if every one of us, and it could just be a simple act of kindness, could just be a simple act of kindness, and then the kind of the ripple effects that go on, and that's what the suffering's about. That's what's recognizing that this illusion that we've created for ourselves, it's necessary. You look at the physical process of evolution. It only happens as a result of literally existential threats. That works. That doesn't work. Or that didn't work. You're out of the gene. You're not in the gene pool anymore. This works. And my belief, given that where we are as a species, whether we survive or not, is not really material. But where we are as a species, the fork in the road that I feel that we're taking, and the current acceleration of suffering is what's necessary to make us unequivocal about which path we need to take. In case you were wondering, guys, that's not a good path. Okay? This is a better path. And that movement that's going on, that causes you to do this, it causes me to write, that causes all of the things that you and I listen to and the conversations we have, that movement toward a more awakened way of being. That's the one to contribute to. That's the one when you put your head down on your pillow at the night and you go through your list of gratitude. And I'm grateful to have been able to have just been a little bit more conscious. I'm grateful to have been able to have this conversation with Kian and the other conversations that I know I'm going to be having throughout the day. Because I got to be that. I got to be the blue sky. I got to be the blue sky.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I'm completely with you on that one, brother. I think when I started this and thought about the name, and my partner came up with this name, Humankinder, it's like humankind-er. And I'm so curious, I think, about who are we becoming? What are we becoming? Right? And There's a couple of different big shifts that we need to make, but I completely agree with you. The fundamental one that enables all of it is this raising of human consciousness, and whatever we can do as individuals by raising our own and creating any conditions to help other people do the same, that's a life well spent.
Beautiful, beautifully put. I mean, one of the things I've done with my writing is it was a process of, we talked about the clouds parting. It was a process of getting out of the way, of allowing that writing just to happen. So in the process of it, you're aware that there's something there that wants to express itself. You're not quite sure what it was. And previously I would try and grab it and try and be all egoically clever about grabbing it. And now I just keep the pen moving, or the fingers actually on the keyboard moving. I just allow it to come through, and then and again, it comes from the feeling. It doesn't come from up here. It comes from a feeling, and then that's what it is, and it flows through, and it's this incredible feel. There's no hubris in this whatsoever intended. It's just a feel. It's nothing to do with me. It's just this feeling that comes through, and these words start to come together, and they create relationships with each other, and off it goes. But what can happen sometimes, and I notice this in my work, is that you become so open to letting it through, you don't actually really notice it yourself. And so when I was starting to do a bit of a retrospective on some of my writings, and I've now started to coalesce that into what's going to become a book called Touching Eternity, which I'm trialing on Substack at the moment, putting out these little short pieces that are a mixture between prose and poetry, that kind of creating this space, teasing apart literalism to create a space. So I've started doing this kind of retrospective and pulling pieces back and then looking at them, almost forgetting that I wrote that, and seeing things in it that I never knew were there. And there was this sense of, I didn't even know that was coming through. I knew about what was at the surface level, and off it went, externally actualized, get it up, got to post on every Tuesday, every Sunday, got to post, off you can find a picture. Oh, okay, there you go. But now as I look at it, this concept of being the first recipient of that which flows through you, because you're the intended recipient. You're the intended recipient. Be that first recipient. And then from there, from that kind of, that sense of pure creation, then make it available. We call it sharing, we call it whatever you want to do, but just share and allow others to be exposed to it to the extent that it may or may not have any. That's not its purpose. Its purpose is to come to be expressed. There's a lovely piece written by, back to not remembering names, the woman who is creatively responsible for modern contemporary dance, Martha Graham. She talks about there being a vitality that flows through each of us. And in each of us, that vitality is unique. Your job is not to compare it to other forms of a vitality, not to try and shape it and make it whatever you think it ought to be. Your job is simply to keep the channel open. It's choosing to flow through you. At the moment, the creation of this podcast and these lovely conversations that you're going to be having as a result of, that's what's flowing through. Your responsibility is to simply keep that channel open. It will let you know what the next thing to do is. That lovely phrase of God laughs when we make plans. It's like, just keep the channel open, be the first recipient, and simply share, allow to be shared, that which flows through you. It's incredibly liberating. And you become the kind of this spectator in wonderment of what actually does come through. Again, no, not only because there's no personal responsibility for it. There's actually, this is what happens when you let go. We talked earlier about how do you bring this awakened way of being into your everyday life. It's like, it's there already. You don't have to do anything. The mistake is thinking you need to do something to bring it into your life. It's already there. It's the getting rid of the stuff that's blocking your way, getting rid of the clouds. And that's the same thing that comes back to we touched on manifestation near the beginning of the conversation. Most people tend to conceive of manifestation as being, the books like The Secret and all the rest of it, as being manifesting this thing I want vividly and powerfully, and I want this in my life, and there it is. And so what you're doing, the first thing you're doing when you're in that kind of manifestation is you're leaving yourself behind. You're going off into something that isn't. So you're instantly into craving. Whereas when you listen to someone like Eckhart Tolle talking about manifestation, what he's talking about is the allowing of that which is already in you. You're simply manifesting that which is already there. And in you, it's this podcast. In me, it's the book I'm writing and the retreat I'm creating. They are there as a result of my looking back at the experience of living this life at age 63. What did I go through? What happened? What did I discover? How did I end up where I am now? How can I come to understand that in a way that enables me to fully absorb those lessons as part of my own journey? And what I end up with is, there's some pieces that I write. Somebody might get value out of that, so I'll publish those in a book. Or there's a kind of an approach or a process that I went through. Okay, I could turn that into a retreat program, and others who have got challenges in their life, they might be able to benefit from that as well. So that's that sort of just simply being the witness of your own. Okay, I'm going to use a funny word now, but being a witness of your own evaporation. Yeah.
Do you know what? You have no idea how much I needed to hear that right now, given where I'm at in this journey, because the pressure that comes to productize, routinize, push things out, as all the advice you get around videos every day, blast content, all of these things. And I feel very strongly that we need to actually provide alternatives to that, because what you're talking about is not building a retreat that's going to make you millions, right? Because you've tried that before and it didn't work. You're not talking about writing a book that you're going to try and force into be a #1 bestseller. You're talking about trusting what's inside you and where you're being called to work in, and putting your full heart into that and just allowing that to be, without the expectation that it must be a certain way in order to satisfy certain needs. And that's a shift in consciousness, and a shift in the way we're being, and a shift in how we operate in community with each other, and an evolution in how we do business together, and all of those things. And I think to be a brave pioneer in that space is a beautiful thing, because if we're going to make this shift, we need to stop thinking about money as the only currency, and that we're all out to just try and stabilize ourselves economically so that therefore then we can retire. To what? And it's going to be, it's a huge, it's almost, it seems like an almost impossible place from where we are now, but yet it has to happen. Or as you said, we perish. I don't know, but something has to shift in that way.
And I think it will, simply by the nature of what it is to be because what it is to be a conscious being. This stuff that we get worried and angst about whether it'll happen or this or the other, remember, that's a construct. That's not reality. That's not fun. That's three-dimensional, time-bound, little tiny slice of something that's happening. That's the film running through the projector. What happens if that film breaks or there's no film there? I'm not watching a film tonight then. Okay. That's the kind of the construct that we make mean so much that we get so angst around the whole thing, and we allow ourselves to be reeled into this external actualization stuff, like doing a podcast, or I've got YouTube accounts and TikTok accounts and Substack and all the rest of it. And of course you get drawn to how many followers you've got and how many this, that, and the other, and whatever it happens to be, because we're so inculcated with this idea of the purpose of this is to get a load of followers, right? It's back to that thing a while back when this whole cult of celebrity started to come about. Back in the day when I was young, people were, in inverted commas, celebrities or famous because they did something that warranted that. Whereas now it's almost become an ambition. I want to be famous. What for? I don't know. I don't care. I just want to be famous. It's not for an anything. And it's the same thing happens with social media and this content, as you say, the kind of like the blasting out, or here's the hacks, or here's the things that you do, and all the rest of it. The mantra I live by when I write something or share it is one and done. If one person looks at it, it's gone beyond me. Now what happens after that's none of my business. None of my business was to be the first recipient, because I'm the intended recipient, to be fully conscious in the creative act of its genesis, and indeed using that act of its genesis as spiritual practice. That is, I am writing to write because it is part of my spiritual practice. I am editing this podcast because it is part of my. I am learning how to do that particular edit, and I don't know why this software program has just done this funny thing, as part of my spiritual practice. So it's all part of my spiritual practice, and there is the piece of art, let's call it, there. Now I put it out there to share, because we all have a responsibility to reach out, to help others, to go beyond ourselves. Once I've done, that's now none of my business. If I want to get into it's optimizing, or I want to get into hashtags, whatever, knock yourself out, but do it as part of your spiritual practice, not to try and get more followers or judge yourself by that. One and done. And so you're right, with the book I'm writing, I'm pretty sure I'll be self-publishing that book. Great. The retreat that I'm running, I'll be running it here on my property in the Algarve. I don't want more than 8 to 10 people at that, because I wouldn't be able to give them the time that they want to. And I actually already know pretty much the people that I'm going to invite along for the first journey, and that will be done pro bono, so that we can explore what happens here, and how is this codification of what I've discovered on my life's journey and what's led me to where I am now, how's that translating to you? Is that helping you? And then if it is helping you, then it moves on, and whatever. It's the doing of it that's the important, and the contribution that the doing of it will make to this spiritual journey that's happening here. And I think that if you can get to that everything that you are doing goes back to that wheel analogy, goes back to the central axis of your spiritual journey, then the deeper resonance of anything, whether it's the stubbing your toe or the kiss on your cheek from your partner, or whatever it is, everything has a utility beyond its material nature, beyond its material level, because its genesis is beyond that. Its genesis is what caused it to come into being. It's so you can trace it back from the outcome. It's like with the koans, as we said before, the kind of the sound of one hand clapping, or what was your original face before your parents were born. But whatever the koan is, it's articulated in such a way as to beget all possible literal answers, to have you curious about what's underneath, what's the genesis of it. And so therefore anything and everything you do can be used as part of your spiritual practice, absolutely including what you're doing with this podcast.
Yeah, and I would also extend that out to think about your entire life as part of that spiritual practice, because there's something here to be said, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, of what about somebody who doesn't have the privilege of the financial freedom that you or I have, even in my position, having grown up where I've grown up, and for someone who's either below the poverty line or somebody who's struggling really badly financially, whether it's in the first world country or third world country, does this stuff apply? And if so, in what way could they practice or get involved in this?
You look at the life of the Buddha. He went the other direction from being a prince and living a life in luxury to living the life of an ascetic monk, flagellating himself, living on begging, all that kind of stuff. And yes, there is everything that happens is your spiritual practice. If you're living in doorways and begging for food, then of course the same truth applies. Certainly, I know from my time in prison that when I was robbed of everything that I felt I needed or was important, I found the most incredible peace in that, because I was at my most free when I was in prison, because there was nothing to strive for, nothing to freezing cold. You're in the same small space for 23 hours a day. There's some acceptance becomes huge. I remember looking at the door and thinking, that door is only locked if I try and open it and find out it's not. So I'm not going to try and open it. Okay. So what's going on here? I'm sitting in a small room that stinks. Stink. What's that? It's relative to what? Okay. So you're forced to explore that. So the suffering forces you to explore. Now, it feels uncomfortable talking about this from my home in the Algarve, despite having gone through the stuff I've gone through. It feels uncomfortable talking about this when I'm talking about some bloke or woman who's forced to live in who lives in a doorway because they're homeless and begging. But that uncomfortableness doesn't make it any less true. Now, certainly, if you look at it from a kind of Maslowian point of view, the hierarchy of needs, as those basic needs of food and shelter and safety and security and relationships are taken care of, so the higher levels of self-actualization become available to you, because we can spend our time in gratitude, being able to dedicate it to creating a podcast or spending hours writing a 500, 600 word piece, because I don't have to beg for my food or go out to work for it or whatever it happens to be. That's my life circumstance and situation, and therefore I choose to express it and explore these higher levels within that context. But it does not mean, and okay, I've never been homeless, but I've certainly woken up in gutters and been suicidal, and I've certainly visited some places that I never thought I would visit in my life. I've been to those dark places, and I'm now grateful for what they taught me. But they can go a different way. I heard just yesterday that a friend of mine who was the sales director of my company, the company that I sold, died of alcohol poisoning in hospital 2 days ago because he didn't find his way out from underneath all of that. So just because of the presence of suffering doesn't mean you're going to find your way through it necessarily. But the presence of suffering offers you an opportunity. You can turn away and run from it, as I did for up until I was like 50 odd, from my childhood and all the rest of it. I ran away from it. And then I got forced to turn toward it because I didn't end up dying, taking huge amounts of drugs in the hope that I would never wake up in the morning. I didn't end up dying, and then found myself on this path of curiosity and this tiny little glimpse of light that I discovered when I had when I was helping others, when I was using some of the stuff that I was exploring just to try and survive in terms of insights into different perspectives and all the rest of it. As I was starting to use that as a functioning addict in my work, believe it or not, as a coach and as a keynote speaker, and I could see that it was having an impact on people and it was helping others channeled through me, that little glimpse of light, even though I'd be going back home to my apartment on my own and getting absolutely wrecked, that glimpse of light was just enough to hold on to and slowly kindle and incubate into that fire out of which eventually my phoenix could fly. And that is available to the man or the woman lying in the doorway. And that is available to the stressed out man or woman working every hour God sends to keep everything together. And then acceptance, responsibility, curiosity. What are the choices I'm making? We can all create scenarios for the busy 21st century lives we live. And the choices of the life I live here, I'm deeply blessed with it. It is a small and contained life because I made a choice to go away from the Aston Martins, the Prada clothes, the whatever it happens to be. It doesn't mean I haven't got a beautiful life here. I have, and I'm extremely grateful for it. But it's not a materialistic life. It's not done in pursuit of that. And by saying, actually, I've recognized that those things aren't of value to me. And so therefore, I'm not constantly on social media trying to fill up my coaching hours, or I'm going out and searching for conferences that I can do a keynote at or whatever. What will happen is the phone will ring and someone will say, are you? And I will say, yeah, that would be nice. Or somebody gets in touch with me and wants a little bit of coaching. Yeah, that would be nice. I've got plenty of time to do my writing, to do the things that create the retreat program, because I've created that space from the choices that I've made within my set of circumstances. Now, someone else could have my set of circumstances, and it could be hell on a bicycle for them because they want this or want the other, or they're still judging themselves relative to everybody else, or whatever it is they're doing. They haven't had the courage to turn toward those things that eat them up in the middle of the night. That takes courage to do. Yeah, that's how I would look at that. If the opportunity is always there, because all of this thing is actually an illusion, is actually a projection on a screen. So it's the screen is always there and the light is always going through them. Whatever the film is that's running through it, that's just a film that's running through it. And from personal experience, no matter how low you go, there is a way out. Life might take you a different way. My dear friend, God rest his soul, rest in peace. And okay, that's the way it went. But by dint of the fact that it's like this, means that you're here and able to say those 3 words. It's like this. Okay, it's like this. What is it you want to do about it?
Then you have a chance.
Absolutely.
Is there by way of closing, is there a practice that you would share or even guide us on, even a short 2-3 minute that you have used that anyone could, if they were listening to this, take away, if it was on the mat even, or if it's a practice in any sort of practical thing that has been useful for you?
The one I'm exploring at the moment is, I'm very eclectic it's very, very Advaita Vedanta, very non-dual, increasingly exploring, as I said, the space of koans. And one koan that I'm exploring at the moment that's proving to be really useful is, what is this? And it's simply an invitation to enter the space that exists after the 3 words have been said. What is this? And it could also be a pointing toward the incessant way in which we ask ourselves, what is this? As if we're expecting or needing an answer. What is this? What is this? What is this? What is this? What is it? We go through our life. What is this? What is this? What is this? And it's an invitation to not ask the questions. So you could almost add to that, what is this when there is no answer? And you end up in that space. But probably to give something, rather than doing a guided thing, but to give, and I use this in the retreat program, that helps us to understand that the world we experience is the story that we're writing moment by moment. And that story, much like the greatest author's stories, start as a blank page. That's the genesis of any story, and it's the genesis of consciousness. It's emptiness. The question to ask yourself, and I'm just wondering whether or not how to pose the question. Let me just run it as a 2-minute little piece that people could do.
Beautiful. Thank you.
So allow yourself just to get comfortable, whatever that means for you. And as you get comfortable, and notice where in your body that comfort has its center, just invite that feeling of comfort to radiate out from that center. And notice how, as it radiates, there's something opening. Something's opening and expanding. We don't need to label it, it's just something's good. That's just something. And it has a kind of tingliness to it, a kind of energy to it. If you place your awareness on your hands, you can probably really start to feel it because there's so many nerve endings there. But it's an openness. It's not definable. It's a space. And notice how we try to fill it in, we try to define it. But let that attempt, rather like a shooting star, just fly through the emptiness. The shooting stars will come, the shooting stars will go. Be with what remains. And in that space of open emptiness, I'm going to invite you to ask yourself a question. Space is open. There's that undefinable energy, vibrations, something there. There's a freshness to it. You're aware that outside of it there's stuff, but it's increasingly distant, it's increasingly far away. And so now you can ask yourself, what's here for me now, when there's nothing left to worry about? What's here for me now, when there's nothing left to worry about? And all the distant shooting stars and hubble bubble are kind of known for what they are. And just stories. It's just the outward show. At this is where we get to go. This is the peace that passeth all understanding. And it's always there. Always. So whenever you're ready, just allow yourself. Just reconnect with the environment around you. And bring back from the experience only that which is going to benefit you.
Beautiful. Thank you for that gift.
No, it's a genuine pleasure. Thank you for the invitation, because I didn't know what was going to come through, but thank you for the invitation.
So where can people find more about your work in all its forms? And we'll put these links in the show notes.
Probably I'm not very good at all this. As I said, I'm not very good at all this social stuff. Tom Griffin.co, just literally CO, is probably the hub. There's things tend to going by the handle Touching Eternity. So there's a TikTok account where I put small little videos. There's a Substack called Touching Eternity. And there are various YouTube channels where the stuff is, but probably the tomgriffin.co is probably the best place to see what unfolds. But it's an element that I think I have a part of my calling is to begin to take that stuff a little bit more seriously, in a sense that what you're doing, which is beautiful, is more reaching out. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's a way to do it that's authentic and real and gives people the opportunity to connect and to see things, because I've really enjoyed your writing, any previous conversations we've had, just things that have come through on LinkedIn that are just that little reminder in a world that's so full of noise, just to recognize and come back to that space that's always there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And it is. And it can become so disguised, and it is for me often. But then when you remember it's there, it's like, oh my God, yeah. It's your dearest friends coming to visit tomorrow, and you've forgotten that, and then you suddenly remember. You go, oh, Danny's here tomorrow. Oh, that's that feeling. Don't know who Danny is.
More of that, please. More of that, please. Yeah.
Lovely. It's been a real pleasure, Cian. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Absolutely. An absolute pleasure. Thanks, Tom.